The Galactic Council chamber was bigger than any building on Earth. Its walls curved up like a giant dome, made from some kind of metal that seemed to shift between silver and gold depending on how the light hit it. Jake Morrison stood at the human delegations spot, trying not to look as small as he felt. The platform where humans stood was one of the newest additions to the chamber, installed just 3 years ago when Earth joined the Council. Jake straightened his dark blue suit for what felt like the 100th time that day. Beside him, Lisa Patel kept her face calm and professional as she read through her digital tablet one more time. She was his aide, his advisor, and probably the smartest person he knew. Her black hair was pulled back in a perfect bun, and her brown eyes moved quickly across the data on her screen. Around them, representatives from a dozen different alien species filled the massive chamber. The Zafrani delegation stood tallest, their bodies made of what looked like living crystal. They were 7 feet tall, and their skin caught the light in rainbow patterns. When they moved, they made soft, chiming sounds like wind through glass. Bells. The Zafrani had been part of the Council for over 1,000 years. They acted like they owned the place, and in many ways they did. Jake watched as Ambassador Krelix of the Zafrani spoke with other delegates. The alien's voice sounded like multiple tones playing at once, creating an effect that was beautiful and unsettling at the same time. Krelix was laughing at something, the sound echoing through the chamber like breaking crystal. Jake noticed that whatever the joke was, it made the smaller species representatives step back nervously. 3 years. That's how long humanity had been here. 3 years of smiling, nodding, and accepting whatever scraps the older species were willing to throw their way. Earth had joined the Galactic Council with such hope, such excitement about meeting other, intelligent life. But Jake had learned quickly that the universe was a lot like Earth's own history. The strong pushed around the weak, and right now humanity was seen as very, very weak. The Valtari representative scuttled past on 8 spider-like legs, each one clicking against the metal floor. The Valtari were ancient, even older than the Zafrani, but they preferred to watch and wait rather than throw their weight around. Their representative, who the humans called Skip because his real name was impossible to pronounce, nodded at Jake with 3 of his 6 eyes. It was as close to friendly as any alien had been lately. Today's session was important. The Council would vote on mining rights for the Kepler 442 system. Humanity had a small colony there called New Haven, just 8,000 people trying to build a new life among the stars. The colony had found valuable minerals, the kind that could help Earth develop better technology. But the Zafrani wanted those minerals too, and they were pushing for humanity to give up their claim. Jake felt his jaw tighten as he thought about the families on New Haven. They had worked so hard to build something there. Kids were being born who had never seen Earth except in pictures. They had schools, farms, and homes. It was becoming a real community, humanity's first successful foothold beyond their solar system. In a small office overlooking the council chamber, Commander Alex Chen watched everything through reinforced glass. He wore a simple black uniform with no visible rank or insignia. Most of the aliens didn't even know he was there, which was exactly how he liked it. His job was to observe, to assess threats, and to report back to Earth's military command. With him were 3 members of his team. Lieutenant Sam Rodriguez was working at a computer terminal, his fingers flying across the keyboard as he monitored communications. Sergeant Katie Walsh stood by the window, her green eyes tracking every movement in the chamber below. Eric Dunn, their tactical specialist, was reviewing security footage from New Haven on his tablet. "They're going to vote against us," Katie said quietly. She didn't need to explain who they were. Everyone knew the Zafrani controlled enough votes to get whatever they wanted. Alex didn't respond immediately. He was thinking about the fleet, hiding in dark space, 3 systems away from here. 48 ships that the Council didn't know about. They were running silent, invisible to sensors, waiting for orders that Alex hoped would never come. The aliens thought humanity had maybe 20 small patrol vessels. They had no idea what Earth had really been building for the past 50 years, ever since they first detected alien signals. "The ambassador still believes in diplomacy," Eric said, not looking up from his tablet. He thinks if we're nice enough, patient enough, they'll eventually respect us. Jake's a good man, Alex replied. He's doing what he was sent here to do. Build relationships, make friends, show them we're civilized. And how's that working out? Sam asked, a bitter edge to his voice. His cousin lived on New Haven. She had 2 kids, ages 6 and 4. Before Alex could answer, the chamber below filled with a loud harmonic tone. The session was beginning. All the representatives moved to their designated positions. Jake Morrison stood straight, his face showing that diplomatic smile he had perfected. Lisa Patel put away her tablet and stood beside him, ready to provide any information he might need. The council's speaker, a Zafrani named Vertex, called the session to order. Its crystalline form stood at the central podium, light refracting through its body in patterns that supposedly conveyed emotion. Right now, the pattern suggested satisfaction, maybe even smugness. We gather today to resolve the matter of mining rights in the Kepler 442 system, Vertex announced, its multi-tonal voice filling the chamber. The Zafrani Collective has presented a proposal for shared extraction, with distribution based on each species' contribution to galactic civilization. Jake's smile never wavered, but Alex saw his hands clench slightly behind his back. Shared extraction was council speak for the Zafrani take 90%, and everyone else fights over the scraps. And contribution to galactic civilization meant the newer species like humanity would get almost nothing. The human delegation wishes to address the council, Jake said, his voice steady and clear. He had learned to project his voice in just the right way so the universal translators would pick it up perfectly. Vertex's light patterns shifted to something like annoyance. The human delegation has already submitted their proposal. Is there new information to consider? Simply a reminder, Jake said, maintaining his diplomatic tone, that New Haven represents humanity's only established colony outside our home system. 8,000 civilians, including 1,500 children, depend on the resources there for survival. We ask the Council to consider the humanitarian aspect of this decision. Several of the smaller species representatives shifted uncomfortably. They understood what it was like to be pushed around by the bigger powers, but none of them would speak up. They never did. Ambassador Krelix made a sound that the translator interpreted as laughter. The humans speak of 8,000 as if it were a significant number. The Zafrani Collective maintains populations of billions across 17 systems. Perhaps humanity should focus on developing their single system before reaching for the Yao stars. A few other species made sounds of agreement. Jake's smile remained fixed, but Lisa's hand moved to his arm, a gentle reminder to stay calm. In the office above, Alex felt his own anger rising. The disrespect was intentional, designed to put humanity in its place. We understand the Zafrani's position, Jake replied smoothly. We simply ask for the opportunity to grow, as all species should have the right to do. The vote was called. One by one, the species cast their decisions. The Zafrani and their allies voted to redistribute the mining rights. The smaller species abstained, too afraid to pick a side. Only the Theraki, a race of peaceful traders, voted in humanity's favor, and Alex made a mental note to remember that kindness. 7 votes against, 1 for, 4 abstentions. The motion passed. The council has spoken, Vertex announced. Satisfaction, clear in its harmonics. Humanity will reduce their mining operations in Kepler 442 by 70% within the next solar rotation. The Zafrani Collective will assume primary extraction rights. Jake nodded, his expression never changing. Humanity thanks the Council for their time and wisdom. We will, of course, comply with the Council's decision. As the session ended and representatives began to leave, Alex turned to his team. Their faces were grim. They all knew what this meant. New Haven would struggle to survive with only 30% of their current resources. Families would suffer. Children would go hungry. But still, Jake Morrison kept smiling down in the chamber, shaking hands, making small talk, being polite. Always polite. Because that was what Earth had told him to do. Be civilized. Show them humanity's best face, Alex wondered how long that would last. Jake Morrison hadn't slept in 36 hours. He sat in his office aboard the human diplomatic station, staring at the reports coming in from New Haven. His coffee had gone cold hours ago, but he didn't notice. The images on his screen were all he could see. Burning buildings, families running through the streets, Zephrani enforcement ships hovering over the colony like giant predators. The grace period should have been 30 days. The Council's own laws said 30 days. But the Zephrani had arrived after only 12 hours, claiming there had been a miscommunication about the start date. Lisa Patel burst through his door without knocking, something she had never done in their 5 years of working together. Her usually perfect appearance was disheveled, her hair coming loose from its bun. "Jake, you need to see this, it's happening live." She threw the video feed onto the main wall screen. It showed the main square of New Haven. A young family was being dragged from their home by Zephrani guards. The father was trying to explain something, holding up a data pad, probably showing the legal documents about the grace period. A Zephrani guard knocked it from his hands and pushed him to the ground. The mother was holding 2 children, a boy who looked about 12 and a little girl who couldn't be more than 6. She was crying, begging the guards to let them gather their belongings. The universal translator picked up her words clearly. "Please, just let us get our daughter's medicine. She needs it. Please." The Zephrani guard's response came through in those multi-tonal harmonics that Jake had learned to hate. "Human organisms are not our concern. You will leave now or be removed by force." The 12-year-old boy stepped forward, putting himself between the guards and his little sister. He was shaking but trying to look brave. "You can't do this. The council said we had 30 days. My dad has the papers." What happened next made Lisa gasp, and Jake's hands clench into fists. The Zephrani guard struck the boy with the back of its crystalline hand. The child flew backward, hitting the ground hard. He didn't get up. The mother screamed. The father tried to run to his son but was held back by 2 guards. The little girl broke free from her mother and ran to her brother, shaking him, crying for him to wake up. The video feed zoomed in, and Jake could see blood pooling beneath the boy's head. "Turn it off," Jake said quietly. "Jake, there's more. The Earth government is watching this too. President Woods wants to talk to you in 5 minutes." Jake stood up slowly. He felt strange, like something inside him had just broken. Or maybe something had just been fixed. For 3 years he had smiled and compromised and accepted insults with grace. He had believed that patience and diplomacy would win in the end. He had trusted the system. The boy on the screen still wasn't moving. His little sister was covered in his blood now, still trying to wake him up. The secure communication line opened and President Amanda Woods appeared on a separate screen. She was in the Situation Room, surrounded by generals and advisors. Jake had never seen her look so angry. Her usual calm demeanor was gone, replaced by something cold and dangerous. "Ambassador Morrison," she began, her voice tight with controlled rage. "I assume you've seen what's happening on New Haven?" "Yes, Madam President. I'm preparing an emergency appeal to the Council. If we can show them proof that the Zephrani violated the grace period..." "The boy died, Jake." The President's words cut through his sentence like a knife. 12 years old. His name was Danny Park. His parents moved to New Haven to give their kids a better life. And now he's dead because we trusted the Council's word. Jake felt the air leave his lungs. Dead. The boy was dead. Danny Park. Now he had a name to go with the face that would haunt him forever. "I'm calling an emergency council session," Jake said, his voice hollow. "They have to answer for this." "Yes, you do that," President Woods said. "And Jake, when you go to that session, I want you to deliver a message from Earth. From all of us. Are you ready to receive official instructions?" Jake straightened. In 3 years, he had never received official instructions beyond maintaining diplomatic relations. "Yes, Madam President. Earth formally withdraws from the Council's protection protocols, effective immediately. Article 7 of our membership charter. You know what that means?" Jake's eyes widened. Article 7 was something they had insisted on including when Earth joined the Council. It allowed humanity to suspend diplomatic status and act unilaterally in cases of extreme violation. No one had thought it would ever be used. Madam President, if we invoke Article 7, we're not invoking it yet, Jake. We're just withdrawing from protection protocols. But be ready, things are about to change. The call ended. Jake looked at Lisa, who had been listening. Her face was pale but determined. What do you need me to do? Get me everything. Every violation, every broken promise, every time they've disrespected us. And Lisa, pack up our personal items from the office quietly. 2 hours later, Jake stood in the emergency council session. The chamber was only half full since many representatives couldn't be bothered to attend an emergency human session. The Zafrani delegation was there, looking bored. Ambassador Krelix was actually examining its crystalline fingers as if this was all beneath its attention. Distinguished members of the council, Jake began, his voice different from usual. The diplomatic warmth was gone. 12 hours ago, Zafrani enforcement vessels arrived at New Haven Colony. The grace period was 30 days. They arrived in 12 hours. Vertex, the speaker, made a dismissive harmonic sound. A regrettable miscommunication. The Zafrani Collective has already expressed their interpretation of the start time. A 12-year-old human child is dead, Jake said flatly. His name was Danny Park. The chamber fell silent. Death during enforcement actions was not unheard of, but it was usually glossed over, not stated so bluntly. Ambassador Krelix finally looked up. Unfortunate. The human child should not have interfered with enforcement personnel. Perhaps this will teach your species to comply more quickly. Several gasps came from the smaller species representatives. Even by council standards, that was cruel. Jake felt something shift inside him like a switch being flipped. The last 3 years of diplomatic training fell away, and something else took its place. Something that had been sleeping. I see, Jake said quietly. Then the council supports the murder of children who try to protect their families. Murder is a strong word, human, Krelix replied, its harmonics carrying amusement. We prefer enforcement incident. Jake nodded slowly. I have a message from Earth. He pulled out his official communication pad and read in a clear, steady voice. Earth formally withdraws from the Council's protection protocols under Article 7 of our membership charter. We retain our membership, but suspend our diplomatic status for 1 solar rotation to address this violation directly. The Valtari representative, Skip, chittered nervously. Article 7? That hasn't been used in 300 years. Surely this can be resolved through proper channels. A child is dead, Jake repeated. The proper channels failed him. Lisa stepped forward and whispered in Jake's ear. New information had just come through. Jake listened, and his face went even harder. I've just been informed that 3 more children have been injured in the ongoing enforcement action. The Zafrani are using weapons against families trying to gather their belongings. The lights in the council chamber suddenly flickered. Then the main viewing screen activated without anyone touching the controls. The image that appeared showed space around New Haven. Empty space. Until suddenly, it wasn't empty anymore. Ships began appearing out of nowhere. Not the 20 patrol vessels the council knew about. Not 50. Not even 100. 300 human warships materialized around the colony, surrounding the Zafrani enforcement fleet. They were massive, painted black as space itself, and bristling with weapons nobody in the council had ever seen before. A human appeared on the screen. Not a diplomat, but a soldier in a black uniform. Admiral Nina Torres looked directly at the council chamber, but her words were clearly meant for the Zafrani. Zafrani enforcement vessels, this is Admiral Torres of the Earth Defense Fleet. You have 60 seconds to cease all hostile actions and withdraw from New Haven. This is your only warning. Ambassador Krelix stood up, its crystalline form darkening. With rage. You dare threaten us? We are founding members of this council, your primitive ships. The transmission cut to static. Every screen in the council chamber went dark for a moment. Then they came back online, showing something impossible. Every Zephrani ship around New Haven had stopped moving. Their engines were dark. Their weapons were offline. They were floating, helplessly in space like dead fish in water. Jake Morrison stood in the center of the council chamber, no longer smiling. Around him, representatives of a dozen species stared in shock at the screens. The humans, the polite, weak, always compromising humans, had just disabled the most advanced fleet in council space, without firing a single shot. 60 seconds, Jake said quietly, looking directly at Ambassador Kralix. 59. 58. The countdown had begun. Ambassador Kralix's crystalline form flickered through several colors that the other species had learned meant panic. The mighty Zephrani, who had ruled the council through fear and strength for 1,000 years, was afraid. Its harmonic voice cracked as it spoke into its communicator, trying to reach the enforcement fleet around New Haven. Fleet Commander Zorax, respond. Engage your emergency power. Destroy those primitive ships immediately. Static was the only answer. On the main screen, the Zephrani vessels continued to drift helplessly, while the human fleet maintained perfect formation around them. It was like watching wolves circling paralyzed prey. Jake Morrison stood perfectly still in the center of the council chamber, his eyes never leaving the countdown timer Lisa was showing him on her pad. 40 seconds, Ambassador Kralix. Your ships are safe for another 40 seconds. The Valtari representative Skip scuttled forward on his 8 legs, his 6 eyes all focused on Jake. Ambassador Morrison, what have your people done? This technology, it should not be possible. Jake turned to face the ancient spider-like being. For 3 years, you've all assumed our politeness was weakness. Our willingness to compromise meant we were inferior. Every single one of you looked at our smiles and thought we were fools. He gestured to the screen where the human fleet hung in space, like dark angels of death. We've been traveling the stars for less than a century, but we've been warriors for 50,000 years. Did you really think we would leave our home without the means to protect ourselves? But the scans, another representative squeaked, a small, furry creature from the Rillan delegation. We scanned your ships, 20 patrol vessels, primitive, fusion reactors, simple projectile weapons. Lisa Patel stepped forward, her own diplomatic mask finally gone. You scanned what we wanted you to scan. You saw what we showed you. Every smile, every bow, every compromise was calculated. We learned your strengths, your weaknesses, your technology. And you learned nothing about us except what we chose to reveal. 20 seconds, Jake announced. Kralix was frantically working at a personal console trying to override the fleet systems remotely. Nothing worked. The Zephrani's greatest warships, vessels that had conquered entire systems, were as helpless as toys. Then another image appeared on the screen. Commander Alex Chen stood on the bridge of the lead Zephrani vessel. Behind him, his team had taken control without any signs of violence. The Zephrani crew stood against the walls, unharmed but clearly terrified. Nobody could understand how the humans had gotten aboard. The Zephrani shields should have been impenetrable, their hull design made boarding impossible. Yet there stood Chen, calm as if he were taking a casual stroll. Council members, Chen said, his voice carrying none of Jake's diplomatic polish. He was a soldier, and he sounded like one. Let me explain what just happened. Every ship in the Zephrani enforcement fleet is currently experiencing what we call a quantum field disruption. It's a technology we developed specifically for this moment. He walked over to the Zephrani fleet commander, who towered over him by 2 feet but somehow looked small and frightened. You see, for 3 years, every time you pushed us around, every insult, every unfair treaty, we didn't get angry. We took notes. We studied your technology during every peaceful interaction. We smiled while we learned exactly how to stop you. 10 seconds, Jake announced in the chamber. Please. Kralix's harmonics had lost all their arrogance. Call off your fleet. We can discuss this. 5 seconds. We'll leave. We'll withdraw from New Haven. 0. Jake looked at the screen. Admiral Torres, the Zephrani have agreed to withdraw. Please escort them to the system boundary. The human fleet began to move in perfect synchronization. Tractor beams, another technology the Council didn't know humanity possessed, locked onto the helpless Zafrani vessels and began towing them away from New Haven like a child dragging broken toys. Chen's image on the screen continued. "While we have your attention, Council, there's something else you should see." He nodded to Katie Walsh, who was working at the Zafrani command console. Her fingers danced across controls that should have required Zafrani biosignatures to access. Suddenly, classified Zafrani military files appeared on every screen in the Council chamber. Invasion plans for 3 smaller Council species. Secret agreements to divide their territories. Plans to eventually force humanity completely out of space once they had taken what they wanted. The chamber erupted in chaos. The 3 species named in the invasion plans were shouting in their various languages. Other species were backing away from the Zafrani delegation. Kralix tried to speak, to deny, but its harmonics were drowned out by the anger of those who had just learned they were next on the menu. Jake raised his hand, and surprisingly, the chamber fell silent. 3 years of being polite and reasonable had given him a reputation, and now that he had dropped that mask, everyone wanted to hear what he would say next. "We're not done," he said simply. The main screen changed again. This time it showed Earth. But not the Earth the Council thought they knew. The planet was surrounded by defense platforms that materialized out of stealth mode. Massive stations that could destroy fleets before they ever reached the atmosphere. The moon revealed hidden shipyards beneath its surface, facilities that could build 100 warships simultaneously. Then Mars appeared. The red planet was covered in military installations, training grounds, and weapons facilities. The asteroid belt was full of hidden supply depots and automated defense systems. Jupiter's moons housed research stations working on technologies that violated several supposed laws of physics. President Amanda Woods appeared on the screen, sitting in her office on Earth. Behind her, through the window, the Council could see ships launching from the Pacific Ocean, rising from hidden underwater facilities. "Members of the Galactic Council," she began, her voice calm but carrying unmistakable authority. "I want to be very clear about something. Humanity came to you in peace. We genuinely wanted to be friends, to learn, to grow together. We showed you our best face, our diplomats, our scientists, our artists." She paused, letting her words sink in. "But make no mistake, we are the species that survived ice ages, plagues, wars, and our own worst impulses. We learned long ago that the universe is not kind to the weak, so while we hoped for peace, we prepared for war." The screen split to show multiple human facilities across Earth's solar system. Weapons laboratories, ship construction yards, training, facilities with thousands of soldiers in advanced combat armor that made the Council's best equipment look like toys. "Every smile you mocked," President Woods continued. "Every unfair deal you forced on us, every time you treated us as inferiors, we were watching, learning, preparing. We have a saying on Earth: speak softly and carry a big stick. You focused on our soft words and never wondered about the stick." Back in the Council chamber, the representatives were silent. The smaller species were looking at humanity's delegation with something approaching awe. The medium powers were recalculating their entire worldview, and the Zafrani stood alone, isolated, their 1,000-year dominance shattered in a single moment. Skip, the ancient Valtari, spoke first. "How many ships do you really have?" Jake looked at the spider-like being. "Enough." "That's not an answer. It's the only answer you need." On the screen, Commander Chen was preparing to leave the Zafrani bridge. But before he did, he turned to the camera one more time. "Oh, and Council, this is just what we're choosing to show you. Ask yourselves, if we hid this for 3 years, what else might we be hiding?" The transmission from the Zafrani ship ended. The human fleet had successfully towed all the enforcement vessels to the system boundary and released them with just enough power to limp home. Not a single shot had been fired. Not one life had been lost beyond poor Danny Park, whose death had changed everything. Jake Morrison looked around the Council chamber at the faces of a dozen species who were reassessing everything they thought they knew about humanity. His diplomatic smile returned, but now it meant something completely different. "Now then," he said pleasantly, as if the last hour hadn't just shattered the entire galactic power structure. I believe we need to discuss reparations for the damage to New Haven and compensation for the Park family. Should we handle this through the proper channels, or would you prefer we handle it directly? The threat was polite, civilized even, but everyone in the chamber heard it clearly. Humanity was done being pushed around. The adults had arrived, and they had brought bigger sticks than anyone had imagined possible. Ambassador Kralix finally found its voice. The Zafrani Collective will pay whatever reparations the Council deems appropriate. It was the first time in 1,000 years a Zafrani had backed down in the Council chamber. It would not be the last. The secure conference room aboard the human diplomatic station was quiet, except for the hum of electronics. Jake Morrison sat at the head of the table, surrounded by faces he had only seen on encrypted communications before. These were the people Earth never told the Council about. The ones who had been preparing for this moment since before humanity joined the galactic community. General Paul Bryant looked like someone's grandfather, with silver hair and kind eyes. Nobody would guess he commanded Earth's hidden armies. Director Sarah Liu seemed like a pleasant middle-aged woman who might teach school. She ran humanity's deep space intelligence network. And Dr. Marcus Jones could have been any scientist at any university, except he had spent 20 years developing weapons that shouldn't exist. Show them everything? General Bryant asked, reviewing the footage from the Council chamber. That seems risky. We showed them what we needed to show, Jake replied. Enough to scare them, not enough to reveal our real capabilities. Dr. Jones pulled up a holographic display. The quantum field disruptor worked perfectly. The Zafrani still don't understand how we got through their shields or how we disabled their entire fleet without damaging a single system. They'll figure it out eventually, Director Liu said. Our estimates give them maybe 5 years before they understand the basic principles. 5 years is more than enough, Jake said. By then, the galaxy will be a very different place. A communication alert interrupted them. It was from New Haven. Jake accepted the connection, and Governor Amy Foster appeared on the screen. Behind her, they could see colonists working to repair the damage from the Zafrani raid. Ambassador Morrison, I wanted to thank you personally. When those enforcement ships left, some of them actually transmitted apologies. I've never heard of Zafrani apologizing for anything. How are your people, Governor? Amy's face darkened. We lost Danny Park and 2 others who died from injuries. 15 more are in critical condition, but our medical team says they'll recover. The colony is angry, Ambassador. They want to know why we let it get this far. Tell them the truth, Jake said. We had to wait for the right moment. If we had shown our strength too early, the entire council would have united against us. We needed them to show their true nature first. After the call ended, General Bryant stood up and walked to the window overlooking the council station. Speaking of showing their true nature, we have a problem. 3 council species have sent secret communications to Earth. They want to know if we're planning to conquer the galaxy. Are we? Dr. Jones asked with a slight smile. No, Jake said firmly. That's the old way, the Zafrani way. We're going to do something much more effective. We're going to make them want to join us. Director Liu raised an eyebrow. How? Watch and learn. 3 hours later, Jake stood once again in the council chamber. This time, every single seat was filled. Word had spread through the galaxy about what humanity had done. Species that hadn't attended a council session in decades had sent representatives. Everyone wanted to see what would happen next. The Zafrani delegation sat in unusual silence. Ambassador Kralix had been recalled and replaced with a younger Zafrani named Zelox, who seemed less arrogant and more cautious. The change was already significant. Distinguished members of the council, Jake began, his diplomatic tone back in place. Humanity would like to propose a new initiative. He gestured to Lisa, who activated a holographic display in the center of the chamber. It showed trade routes, defense agreements, and technology-sharing proposals. But these weren't the unfair deals the council was used to. These were genuinely equal partnerships. We proposed the creation of a mutual defense and development pact. Any species that joins will receive access to certain human technologies, including improved medical systems, agricultural developments, and defensive capabilities. In return, they share their own innovations and commit to defending each other against aggression. The smaller species representatives immediately began whispering among themselves. This was unprecedented. Usually, the powerful species kept their advantages to themselves, using them to maintain control. The Rillan representative, the small furry creature who had spoken earlier, raised a tentative paw. What technologies exactly would humanity share? Lisa stepped forward with a datapad. Medical nanotechnology that can cure most diseases. Agricultural systems that can triple food production. Shield generators that can protect colonies from asteroid impacts. And a limited version of our stealth technology for defensive purposes. The chamber erupted in discussion. These were technologies that could transform struggling species into thriving civilizations. The Theraki representative, whose people had voted in humanity's favor earlier, stood up. What does humanity gain from this? These technologies are worth entire star systems. Jake smiled, and this time it was genuine. We gain allies. Real allies, not subordinates. We gain trading partners who prosper and grow stronger. We gain a galaxy where species work together instead of conquering each other. Xelox, the new Zephrani ambassador, finally spoke. Its harmonics were uncertain, lacking the usual Zephrani arrogance. And if a species chooses not to join this pact, then they don't, Jake said simply. We're not forcing anyone. But they also don't get protection if they decide to attack pact members. The implied threat was clear. Join the humans and prosper, or stand alone and risk facing what the Zephrani enforcement fleet had experienced. Skip, the Valtari representative, moved to the center of the chamber. The Valtari have observed this galaxy for 2,000 years. We have seen empires rise and fall, always through force, always through conquest. What humanity proposes has never been tried on this scale. Then maybe it's time for something new, Jake replied. Over the next several hours, species after species announced their interest in the pact. The smaller species practically begged to join immediately. The medium powers were more cautious but clearly interested. Even some of the larger species were considering it. The Zephrani remained silent. As the session concluded, Jake was approached by Xelox. The young Zephrani's crystalline form shifted through patterns of uncertainty. Ambassador Morrison, Xelox said quietly, ensuring no one else could hear. My government has instructed me to ask, would the Zephrani be welcome in this pact? Jake studied the alien who represented the species that had killed Danny Park just days ago. It would be so easy to say no, to punish them, to leave them isolated and alone. But that wasn't the human way. At least, not the way humanity wanted to be. Every species is welcome, Jake said. But the Zephrani would need to make amends for their past actions. Real amends, not just words. What would that require? Return all territories taken by force in the last century. Pay reparations to species you've exploited. Share your technologies freely with pact members, and accept that in this new alliance you're equals, not superiors. Xelox's form darkened, which Jake had learned meant deep thought. That would be difficult for my people to accept. We have been dominant for so long. The Roman Empire thought the same thing, Jake said. So did the British Empire and the American Empire. Every dominant power thinks they'll rule forever. The smart ones learn to adapt when the world changes. The stubborn ones become history lessons. As Xelox departed to communicate with his government, Lisa approached Jake. Do you really think the Zephrani will join? They will, Jake said confidently. They're not stupid, just arrogant, and we just gave them a masterclass in humility. That evening, Jake stood in his office looking out at the stars, the same stars humanity had looked up at for thousands of years, dreaming of what was out there. They had found wonders and beauty, but also danger and cruelty, just like Earth itself. His communication pad chimed. It was a message from President Woods, short and to the point. Well done, Ambassador. Proceed with Phase 2. Jake smiled. The Council thought humanity had shown all its cards. They had no idea that this was just the beginning. Phase 2 would introduce technologies that would revolutionize galactic civilization. Phase 3 would establish humanity as the de facto peacekeepers of the galaxy. And Phase 4, well, Phase 4 would ensure that what happened to Danny Park would never happen to any child, human or alien, ever again. The polite mask was off, but humanity wasn't becoming conquerors. They were becoming something far more powerful. They were becoming the species that others turned to for protection, for guidance, for hope. They were becoming leaders not through force but through strength used wisely. And somewhere in the galaxy, on a small colony called New Haven, Danny Park's sister placed flowers on his grave. She didn't know that her brother's death had changed the course of galactic history. She only knew that he had been brave, and that the bad aliens who hurt him were gone now. The humans had promised they would never come back. The humans kept their promises. 6 months had passed since humanity showed its true face to the galaxy. The council chamber looked different now. Where once species had sat in rigid hierarchies based on power and age, now the seating had been reorganized into a circle. No one species sat above another. It had been humanity's first requirement for the new order. Jake Morrison entered the chamber for what would be a historic session. Beside him walked Lisa Patel, now promoted to co-ambassador, and behind them came a group that would have been impossible 6 months ago. Representatives from 37 species, all members of the Mutual Defense and Development Pact that humanity had created. The transformation had been remarkable. The Rilan, once a struggling species barely surviving on 3 worlds, now had medical technology that had eliminated most of their diseases. Their population was growing for the first time in centuries. The Tharaki had received agricultural systems that turned their desert worlds into gardens. Even some of the medium powers had joined after seeing the prosperity the pact brought. At the center of the chamber, a memorial had been erected. It was simple, just a small crystal that projected a hologram. The image showed a young boy's face, Danny Park, the 12-year-old whose death had changed everything. Below it, words in every language of the council, never again. Zalox, the Zephrani ambassador, entered the chamber with what could only be described as humility. The Zephrani had spent 3 months debating before finally accepting humanity's terms. They had returned conquered territories, paid massive reparations, and for the first time in their history, apologized, not just for Danny Park, but for centuries of oppression. Today's NAI session was special. Today, the Zephrani would officially join the pact. Jake stood at the speaker's position, though it was no longer elevated above the others. 6 months ago, this council witnessed humanity drop its diplomatic mask. Some of you were frightened. Some were angry, some were relieved. All of you were surprised. He paused, looking around the chamber. But what you've learned since then is that our strength was never about conquest. It was about having the power to choose peace from a position of strength, not weakness. Skip, the ancient Valtari, raised one of his legs for attention. Ambassador Morrison, there are still questions. Your military capabilities, the technologies you've revealed, they suggest decades, perhaps centuries of hidden development. How is this possible for such a young spacefaring species? Jake smiled. Would you like the truth? Always, Skip replied. We've been preparing since before we knew you existed. Humanity has always looked to the stars and asked, what if we're not alone? And more importantly, what if they're hostile? Every science fiction story we wrote, every movie we made about alien invasions, they weren't just entertainment. They were preparation, mental training for possibilities. Dr. Marcus Jones had been given permission to attend this session. He stood up to elaborate. When we detected the first alien signals 50 years before making contact, we didn't celebrate. We prepared. We developed weapons to fight enemies we hadn't met. We built defenses against technologies we didn't understand. We imagined every possible threat and created counters for them. Paranoid, someone called out from the back of the chamber. Prepared, Jake corrected. And when we finally met you, when we saw that the galaxy was full of life but also full of the same problems Earth had faced, We knew our preparation had been worth it. We just hoped we'd never have to use it. Zelok stood, its crystalline form shifting to patterns that indicated a request to speak. The Zephrani have something to say. The chamber fell silent. This was the moment everyone had been waiting for. For 1,000 years, Zelok began. The Zephrani believed that strength meant dominance. That power meant the right to take what we wanted. When humanity disabled our entire fleet without firing a shot, we were forced to confront a truth we had ignored. True strength is not in conquering others, it's in having the power to conquer and choosing not to. The Zephrani ambassador moved to the memorial of Danny Park. This child's death shames us, not because we were caught or punished, but because we had become something ugly. Humanity held up a mirror and we did not like what we saw. Zelok placed a small crystal beside the memorial. It began to glow, creating a harmony with the hologram. The Zephrani formally request membership in the Mutual Defense and Development Pact. We offer all our technologies, all our knowledge, freely and without reservation. The chamber was so quiet you could hear the air recycling systems. This was unprecedented. The Zephrani were offering everything, holding nothing back. Jake looked at Lisa, who nodded. They had discussed this moment with Earth's leadership. The decision had been made. The Zephrani's request is accepted, Jake announced. Welcome to the Pact. What happened next would be recorded in history books across the galaxy. The Zephrani, the proud, arrogant Zephrani, bowed. Not a small gesture, but a deep, formal bow to the chamber, to humanity, and to the memorial of the child they had killed. As the session continued, reports came in from across the galaxy. Human medical ships were visiting plague-stricken worlds, curing diseases that had killed millions. Human agricultural experts were teaching desert species how to feed their populations. Human engineers were helping rebuild worlds devastated by natural disasters. But most importantly, human military forces were standing guard, not as conquerors, but as protectors. When pirates attacked a Rillan colony, human ships appeared as if from nowhere, disabling the attackers without killing them. When an asteroid threatened a Theraki world, human weapons turned it to dust. When two species had a border dispute, human mediators helped find a solution that benefited both. Commander Alex Chen, now Admiral Chen, appeared on the main screen from his flagship. Behind him, the bridge crew included members from 15 different species all working together. Council members, he said. I'm pleased to report that for the first time in recorded history, there have been no military conflicts in Council space for 30 consecutive days. No invasions, no raids, no territorial seizures. Peace, actual peace, is breaking out. The chamber erupted in celebration. Different species expressing joy in their various ways created a symphony of happiness that had never been heard before. But Jake raised his hand for silence. There was one more thing to address. There's something else humanity needs to tell you, he said. Everything we've shown you, the fleets, the weapons, the technologies, they're not our most powerful asset. The chamber grew quiet again, some with concern. What else could humanity be hiding? Jake smiled, his genuine smile, not the diplomatic one. Our greatest strength is that we don't want to rule you. We don't want to control you. We want to explore with you, learn with you, grow with you. We want to be your friends, your protectors when needed, your partners always. He gestured to the memorial. Danny Park died because we were too patient, too willing to accept abuse for the sake of peace. But his death taught us and you a valuable lesson. Peace without the ability to enforce it is just surrender. But power without the wisdom to use it sparingly is just tyranny. President Amanda Woods appeared on the screen, broadcasting from Earth. The galaxy has entered a new age, not the human age, as some have called it, but the age of cooperation. Humanity will not rule you. We will stand with you. We will protect those who need protection, help those who need help, and stop those who would harm others. She paused, looking directly at the camera. But make no mistake. If anyone anywhere ever hurts a child again, if anyone brings war to peaceful worlds, if anyone tries to resurrect the old ways of conquest and oppression, they will learn that humanity's polite mode can still be turned off. And next time, We won't be as gentle. As the session ended and representatives began to leave, many stopped at Danny Park's memorial. Each species left something according to their traditions: flowers, crystals, energy patterns, songs and frequencies humans couldn't hear. A child who had died in fear and pain had become a symbol of change for an entire galaxy. Jake stood watching as the chamber slowly emptied. Lisa stood beside him, reviewing reports from across human space. Colony applications had increased 10,000%. Species wanted to live alongside humans, to learn from them, to be protected by them. "Do you think it will last?" Lisa asked. "This peace?" Jake thought about it. "No," he said honestly. "Someday, somewhere, someone will challenge it. Maybe a species from beyond council space. Maybe a faction that wants to return to the old ways. Maybe something we haven't imagined yet." And when that happens? Jake's expression hardened, reminding Lisa that beneath the diplomat was a human who had watched a child die for political gain. Then we remind them why the galaxy chose our protection. We remind them what happens when humanity stops being polite. Weeks turn to months, months to years. The Mutual Defense and Development Pact grew to include every council species. Technologies were shared freely. Worlds that had been enemies for centuries became trading partners. Children of different species played together on mixed colonies, and in schools across the galaxy. They taught the story of the day humanity stopped smiling, how a species barely out of their home system had hidden strength that dwarfed ancient empires, how they had chosen to use that strength not for conquest but for protection.